there are quite a number of suits pending before the Supreme Court, which seeks, amongst others, to nullify the agreement in question in its entirety. And so I, as a lawyer, would not like to commit contempt by discussing the merits at this stage. But suffice it to say that at the committee level, when the agreement came before us for consideration, we raised quite a number of issues, and which issues we insisted be captured succinctly in the committee's report. Those objections we raised were captured, and I'll refer to the committee's report in a moment. But before I do that, let me state that the stock in trade of the NPP is outright lies deception. You know, when their backs are against the wall, they try to mislead the public with lies. They don't even feel ashamed. It doesn't matter what records hands can be laid upon. I mean, subsequently, they don't care. They just lie through their teeth. Now, when the issues about the unconstitutionality of the agreement came about, and the NPP suddenly had their backs against the wall, they decided to cause some mischief and to mislead Ghanaians into believing that those of us who serve on the committee, the joint committee which was tasked with the duty and responsibility of scrutinizing the agreement and making recommendations to the plenary, and who came from the minority, were in the majority on the committee, and that we, by virtue of the fact that we constituted the majority on the committee at that time, must have been the ones who recommended that the agreement be approved or ratified by the plenary. I am the ranking member for the Defense and Interior Committee, and on that occasion when we met, I led my colleagues to resist the agreement and all attempts to have it railroaded. I led the charge. And the very first things we did when the agreement was distributed, copies of it, to us, was to immediately ask germane questions regarding the constitutionality of the agreement. Because we detected that the agreement had not been executed. So I posed the question and asked the Minister for the Defense, and he was flanked by quite a number of generals, to respond directly to the issue of the non-execution of the agreement. The minister started beating about the bush, but at the end of the day, he admitted, in fact, he confessed that yes, indeed, the agreement had not been executed because they thought that in view of the importance of the agreement to Ghana's security, there was need for the People's Assembly to be given the opportunity to first and foremost do what he termed as rectifications. Rectifications. I mean, the synonym would be to correct the agreement before the executive would now exercise its exclusive executive authority of executing international agreements before they are brought before Parliament for ratification. At that point, I said, no way. You had acted unconstitutionally, and we couldn't have anything to do with an unexecuted draft agreement, because without the execution, the agreement remained in the form of a draft. Now, if you look at Article 75 of our Constitution, that article is in two parts. The first part of Article 75 vests the authority to execute international agreements and treaties exclusively in the executive. And the executive in Article 58 refers to the president. But that article conceives of a situation whereby in the event that the president is unable to discharge the mandate of personally carrying out the execution, he can assign an agent to discharge that function for and on his behalf. And so the argument was simple, that you cannot put the cart before the donkey. Execution under Article 75 must precede parliamentary ratification. So we couldn't have anything to do with the agreement. Now, this objection, it is important to note, caused a stalemate at the level of the committee. Deliberations came to a standstill for close to conservatively 3 hours. Now, at that point, I invoked the standing orders, Order 211 of the standing orders of Parliament, and asked the chairman to rule. You know, the committees are made up of majority members and minority members. All committees, apart from a few, namely the Committee for Public Accounts Committee and the Subsidiary Legislation Committees, which are headed by a convention, by members of the opposition. All other committees are chaired by those from the majority, side of the House. So our committee is chaired by Honorable Seth Achampong, and so he sat in the chair when we deliberated upon this particular agreement. So I took the objection, I invoked the relevant standing order, and asked him to rule. His refrain was that, I will not allow this matter to create a division. But that is what is contemplated under Order 211. Because when you object, you raise critical objections, and you want to have a sense of how the committee thinks or feels about the matter, you put the objection to the vote. So you first of all declare in a ruling that the objections raised have resulted in a division before the committee, to now pave the way for the clerk to the committee to, of course, go around all the members of the committee and ask them how they intend to vote on the matter. The chairman declined to rule in accordance with the order. So he acted in contravention of Standing Order 211. Fundamental question is, when somebody in the chair fails or omits, refuses to apply a relevant standing order, what do? Sometimes it is their tactic to frustrate minority groups within parliaments to stage walkouts so that they can have their way. But because of the nature of the issues that were arising from the text of the agreement, I said no, I was not going to fall into that trap by leading my colleagues to stage a walkout. Because if we did that, we would have disabled ourselves from making the arguments the minority leader, Honorable Harun Idrisu, made at the plenary when the report was eventually laid. So we resisted that temptation and stayed on. So the point to note is that the committee was never allowed to vote at any particular moment of our deliberations. And so if anybody creates the impression or argues, but through the mere exhibition of the votes and proceedings of Parliament, and identifies members in attendance by their respective political parties and comes to the simple conclusion that the NDC members of Parliament in attendance were 13 and MPP members in attendance were 10, and therefore if the committee came to certain conclusions, it must have come from the minority. It's disingenuous, it is misleading, because when committees vote, the voting patterns would usually be captured in the votes and proceedings. And so when I challenged them, I wrote a statement, it is online, when you Google you'd see. I wrote a statement and challenged them to come out and contest the view and position I had taken relative to the diabolical display of the votes and proceedings, which then afforded them the opportunity to arrive at that simplistic, view, taking that we were the ones who voted for the agreement, to see whether that would stand or fly in the face of the evidence. Up till now, I haven't seen or heard of any response because they cannot respond. So we need to set the record straight. I have the committee's report in my hands. If you look at it, you would see that the very first observation that was raised was relative to the unconstitutionality of the agreement. And this observation came from us, of course. That is contained in paragraph 6.1, and it reads, under Article 75 of the 92 Constitution, this agreement, as any other international agreement executed by the executive, ought to be placed before Parliament for ratification by resolution. That is the statement relative to the position of the law as contained in Article 75. Then our own conclusions as a committee were as follows. This agreement was placed before Parliament by the executive for ratification prior to its execution. So when a committee makes this critical finding, which borders on unconstitutionality, and this was coming from the minority, how can you then turn around, look at Ghanaians in the face, and say it was the minority that rather recommended the approval of the agreement? The principle of nullity would come to the fore in this matter, especially when you read the text of Article 75. We're saying that there was no agreement before us, let alone ratify same. So how could the minority have taken such a position and turned around to be the ones to say, let the agreement pass? Let me take you to another critical and fundamental observation we made, which was also captured, because I insisted that all our objections be captured in the report, and that is unprecedented. I think they must be licking their wounds now because they got carried away and allowed us to have our views reflect in the report in a manner that has never happened in our parliamentary history. So all the things we have said, all the things David has said, Comrade Mona has said, Kwesi Pratt have said, are captured in the report. Never mind, the language may be a bit obscured, but you would find them contained in paragraph 6.3, and it's captioned as follows: additions in 2018 agreement. So we simply try to draw the distinction between previous military cooperation agreements and the 2018 agreement in the following words. The committee also observed that this agreement is an enhancement over the 24 February 1998 exchange of notes in certain respects, such as third-party damage claims as per Article 15. And that is the article which says, when it comes to third-party claims, like you and all of us seated in this hall, if we were to suffer injury as a result of the operation of American forces in our country, that is, if this agreement ever sees the day of light, you will not be able to mount claims against them by simply seeking redress in a Ghanaian court. Third-party claims, and that it is U.S. law which would be applicable. So we said that that particular provision was alien to all previous agreements that had been entered into by previous governments, and it was captured. They allowed that to be captured. Then it goes on. Payment of, okay, that is the same thing, and pre-positioning and storage of material. It is important to know that that word, material, is not spelled the way you and I would ordinarily spell material. This is, the pronunciation is even different. They pronounce it as material. when I pushed the generals who had accompanied the minister, that was the pronunciation they offered. They said material. So, pre-positioning and storage of material as provided for in Article 7. Then it goes on unimpeded access as contained in Article 5 and settlement of disputes provided for in Article 18. So all the fundamental objections that my colleagues have alluded to were taken at the level of the committee. And all these found their way into the committee's report. So how could the minority group have led the charge in getting all these objections captured in the report and turn around to be the ones to recommend that the agreement be passed? That would have been an incongruous, sort of act that cannot be supported by the evidence contained in this particular report. And that is the committee's report. It now forms part of the Hansard. So I will now take us to the conclusion, because when the matter now came before the plenary, something happened. A lot of people, even members of parliament, did not understand why there was a lot of chaos and confusion at the plenary when the report was eventually laid. You would all recall, those who followed proceedings on TV would recall that when the chairman of the committee laid the report, I rose. The reason why I had to rise was because we needed to set the record straight, because everything we had said by way of objections to the agreement naturally could not have resulted in a consensus. But you see, sadly, I think the standing orders of parliament would have to be reviewed. Because when committees work at the level of the committee, the reports are signed by the chairman and the clerks to the committee. Ranking members have no role to play at that level. So that is the problem. So we had expected as a group that the report would have been presented before the entire committee, and for the entire committee to approve of it before the chairman finally appends his signature. That didn't happen. So when we now read the conclusion, we realized that they had stated that the committee, and let me read, has thoroughly examined the agreement and finds that its ratification would help provide a mutually beneficial arrangement for cooperation and readiness to combat emerging global security threats, whilst also enhancing the already existing relationship between the two countries in the area of security operation. I said no, that couldn't be the conclusion of the committee, because we had taken fundamental objections. Some of them were constitutional in nature. And so if the majority on the committee, the MPP majority, were bent on recommending this particular agreement for approval, we would not be part of it. So I rose and proposed an amendment, which was acceptable to them because that amendment was a true reflection of what transpired at the level of the committee. So what amendment did I propose? This was how I did my proposals for amendment. So eventually when they allowed me to take the amendment, this was how it now read. The committee has thoroughly examined the agreement and finds by a majority decision. By a majority decision, and this particular amendment stood in my name. So if you go to the Hansard now, you find that that is what is contained, in the Hansard. By a majority decision. Which majority? The MPP majority. And then at the concluding paragraph, it also read, and I inserted this, that insert after committee, so that it will now read as follows. The committee, by a majority decision, recommends to the House to adopt this report and ratify by resolution, because we didn't want to be part of it for posterity's sake. So this was carried. Now, when we did that, as if it was by design, The chairman of the committee also now got up again and said we had pushed them to accept a very damaging observation, and therefore he was also going to make a counter proposal for amendment. And we said no, we didn't have a challenge with that. Go on. So you don't recall that after my amendment was taken, the chairman of the committee also made an amendment to paragraph 6.4. And what does paragraph 6.4 say? What is the original text? This is how it reads. It's captioned as follows: freedom of movement of vehicles, vessels, and aircraft. The committee noted with concern, and remember here, the committee is in the collective. So the committee noted with concern the unfettered access the agreement grants to the aircraft, vehicles, and vessels of the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD, to enter, exit, and freely move within the territory, airspace, and territorial waters of Ghana. This may appear to undermine the sovereignty and security of Ghana. This observation came from us. But you see, the language was couched in the collective. So the moment I took the amendment to the conclusion, the chairman also felt it compelling to distance themselves from this particular damaging finding of fact by the committee. And what amendment did he propose? He now said, insert before the committee the following words: some members of the committee noted with concern, right? So that question to ask is, who would the some members of committee refer to? Naturally, he was referring to the NDC minority members on the committee. He couldn't have been referring to the MPP majority members on the committee. So if you now understand the sequence of events, you will not be misled by the mischief, the lies that they peddled, on that occasion. But let me just ask this question, and I asked that question in my statement relative to the attempt without success to create the impression that we recommended the agreement for approval. I asked the question. So is that to say that if we were, in the majority on the committee and actually voted, assuming without admitting, is that to say that the MPP majority who were in the minority on the committee voted against their own government-sponsored agreement? I challenge the chairman to come out and respond to that query. If he would respond, maybe it is tomorrow. But if he responds, I know how to deal with them, because then I will call for the minutes of the entire proceedings at the committee level and further expose them. So this was what transpired at the committee level. Ladies and gentlemen, having done that, I know we are constrained by time, but it is important to draw certain critical distinctions between the 1998 exchange of diplomatic notes that they have made a lot of capital out of, and the 2015 cross-servicing agreements. From the 2018 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which is the bone of contention. I need to draw those distinctions, and for you to see that under the NDC, we never came close to selling Ghana's sovereignty to any other nation on earth, and will never tread, those dangerous grounds. First, let me start with the 2015 cross-servicing agreement, and I have it right here. Maybe at the right time we can make photocopies. It's quite bulky, but the relevant portions, a lot of it is made up of some annexures. That is why it appears bulky, but for the real content of it is not really much. What was it all about? And you find the object of the 2015 cross-servicing agreement contained in Article 3.3. If you read Article 3.3 of the 2015 agreement. The March talked about 2015 agreement, and they've made a whole lot of capital out of it. When you pin them down and say, what are the similarities between the 2015 agreement and the 2018 agreement, you will see them beat a retreat. They will never engage you in any such debate because they know what the 2015 agreement was all about. It was a cross-servicing agreement, you see. So we entered into an agreement, right, for services from the United States Armed Forces for the purchase of equipment, spare parts, to service our armed forces. Now, the principle of reciprocity in public international law, I mean, which has actually become part of customary, law, because it is generally accepted in diplomatic relations, is the principle of reciprocity. When you read this agreement, you will see the principle of reciprocity repeated over and over and over. So, you would see, and this particular agreement was commercial in nature, so that whatever services the United Armed Forces offered their Ghanaian counterparts, they did that for money. Whatever support we offered them, they in turn, we in turn would expect that they would pay for our services. So there was reciprocity, and that is it. And why wouldn't you have this agreement? We have similar agreements with other foreign military powers. Name them: Russia, Britain, all arms manufacturing countries. We've had this type of relationship with them before. When we bought the MiG helicopters from Russia, what preceded them was an agreement for the procurement of those equipment. Do we produce helicopters in this country? No. So that was all the 2015 cross-servicing agreement was about. It was a purely commercial transaction, which can never, ever be elevated to the status the 2018 agreement would have. That is, if it is allowed to come into effect. So I've asked them to stop confusing Ghanaians with the 2015 commercial transaction that we legitimately entered into with the United States of America. Now, when my comrade Bernard Mona had his turn, and of course, Uncle Kwesi Pratt, they spoke about how dangerous this particular agreement, I'm talking about the 2018 agreement, is, to the extent that the United States Armed Forces can even import into this country nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, name them. Now, when I made this point, MPP apologists argued that we were indulging in scaremongering. And then I referred them to the 2015 cross-servicing agreement. Because what the 2015 cross-servicing agreement did was to expressly exclude from the list of equipment that could be transferred. That agreement expressly excluded chemical weapons, biological weapons, and nuclear munition. So, principles of specificity, you would see them at work in the 2015 agreement. So we asked, why is it that you don't have similar articles contained in the 2018 agreement? When you push them thus far, you see them saying, oh no, but we have all said they are not the same. But they have also told us that the 2015 and 98 agreements constitute the foundation for the 2018 agreement. What is that? You see? So we are not scaremongering. We are relying on facts born out of the 2015 agreement to state categorically that they can use Ghana as dumping grounds for nuclear weapons, etc. Because it has already been demonstrated that what they are seeking to do is to establish a base Now, if you look at Article 7 of the 2018 agreement, it talks about the prepositioning of equipment and material. Remember, I talked about material. And let me just tell you, when the minister appeared before us, he was flanked with top generals. I asked him, Honorable Minister, the 2018 agreement has a definition provision. You see, it has, and that is standard with all agreements. It defines words that are hard to comprehend. But the word material, remember, M-A-T-E-R-I with E, no material, material has not been defined. What is the meaning of material, Honorable Minister? Because I don't know what it is about. The minister started scratching his head. And take it from me, when I asked the generals what material meant, they were scratching their heads. So when my brother David Agbe tells you that if you go through the text, there is more to it than meets the eye, and he's a security expert, he knows exactly what he's talking about, because they don't even know what material means. So I argued at the level of the committee that expunge the whole of Article 7, because material could then be the word that they would rely upon to bring into the country nuclear munition, chemical weapons, biological weapons, etc. But you see, the generals then tried to persuade the committee that, you see, you cannot tinker with this agreement. You can't tinker with it, and yet you wanted Parliament to ratify it. So was it an agreement reached at arm's length, or it was an imposition? Clear imposition. Clear imposition. And so when we talk about our sovereignty being sold, we are fortified. And I have in my hands a report. This is also online. The report on the status of forces agreements. I mean, you need to download this from the internet. And this is coming from the State Department. The State Department commissioned security experts within the United States itself to come out with a report, that will guide them in their future attempts to forge military pacts with foreign countries. This is the report. It's quite bulky.